This is Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur with your host, Lynn Freest. Lynn will share ideas and expert advice from people that are walking in your shoes and living their encore careers, where they want and at the pace they want. You'll start a company of one with confidence and knowledge to live a fulfilled life of freedom and ease. Lynn is a coach and leadership consultant whose mission is to show senior leaders and experts how to start something refreshing and new after a full career in the corporate environment.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the podcast, Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur. Today's episode is number 142. It's some initial reflections on the Modern Elder Academy seminar that I recently completed. And this will be more about process maybe than content, and we'll be following up with content later. So, making the leap from being a corporate leader and expert into becoming a solopreneur can be daunting, but the rewards are great. You can work when you want, where you want, and you can do the work you love. And I can be that guide and thinking partner to help you do that. I can help you go farther and faster based on what I've learned from being on this journey for several years. So if you're even having some thoughts about starting an encore career, please contact me. So today is a little bit of a discussion around the Modern Elder Academy, and I've mentioned it before, but just a quick recap. The link to it will be in the show notes. So it's kind of built around the idea that, as people reach midlife, there's other things they can continue to be doing. And again, I've shared some of these thoughts before, but it's worth a review. We may be anticipating now that we have a 60-year adult life or career or mixture of those. And often at about age 55, people think of retiring, but they're really at that point only halfway through their adult life. Another thing is we're living longer and we're living healthier, but living longer does become more expensive. So in the end, this is also just not about boomers, because this is kind of the way the world is going to be with longer lives and longer careers. So this is going to apply to everyone as we move forward. An interesting book that I just was introduced to through the Modern Elder Academy was Breaking the Age Code: How Your Beliefs About Aging Determine How Long and How Well You Live. And it's written by Becca Levy. And again, we'll probably go into more depth on that in a later episode, but a couple of the key takeaways were from her studies at Harvard, a positive mindset can add 7.5 years to your life. And that's more than almost any other activity that can add years to your life. The other thing is, while we talk about ageism or how others perceive us, she says a lot of what goes on with respect to our mindset is what we tell ourselves about being aged or elderly or a modern elder, whatever it may be. So again, we'll cover this in more depth at a later one, and there'll be a link to her book in the show notes. So back to the Modern Elder Academy seminar that I just went through. It was an 8-week seminar. The Modern Elder Academy was originally established as a residency-based program in Baja, Mexico. But when COVID hit, they had to kind of go and rethink everything because obviously residency-based things weren't working there for really a couple of years. And what they did is they developed really an amazing and engaging virtual program. So it's a mixture of elements, really I'll say an interesting mix of elements. There are video elements of the program. There are recorded sessions from various thought leaders. There's also some, I'll call them stretch elements, like they introduce poetry or visual elements. Even some, they bring in videos that you might look that aren't just talking heads, but, other kinds of things to, again, trying to help people expand how they're thinking. Another piece that was very informative is that there are times, pieces, and specific reflection questions really built into everything you do. So again, this is not just about sitting there on a webinar or consuming content. They actually intentionally say, okay, here's the point in time. You'd have to, reflect a little. This is what we've said. How does it apply to you? What do you think about it? So they really built in this whole idea of reflection. And I think obviously that's how we learn. Often we will go through a 1-hour webinar and we remember almost very little of it, certainly a day or two later. But again, they have shorter videos in this. Even within some of the videos, they take a time out and reflect on a couple of questions. So it's really got a wealth of reflection built into each of the 8 weeks or the different topics that we're covered. Now, the other thing is interesting is because of size. The seminar had a large enrollment. A lot of people were involved and engaged, but then they broke us down into smaller groups of about 8 or so. And then even further than that, there was a process to encourage each of the individuals in the group of 8, to have a one-on-one call with one another. So once again, this is an interesting concept. Rather than just being a passive consumer of content, they actually had you down into a smaller group. And within that smaller group, you had the opportunity to really get to know each other a little bit better, a little bit deeper, as well as, they encouraged us to share our reflections with others that we were getting as we were making note during the 8 weeks of the different topics. Then they also had large live events spaced in there. So this wasn't just, again, a bunch of recorded stuff, but they actually had about 4 live events spaced in there where they covered things in a live manner. They brought on, again, guest speakers. They brought in just people to talk back and forth. Then the next piece, again, that I think just enabled engagement, enabled you to keep learning, was they had weekly what they called cafes. And these were kind of loosely structured around what the topic for that particular week was, but it was really pretty flexible. So it was the kind of thing that, again, allowed for some spontaneity. What was the top question that, people were looking at? So when you put all this together, I think it created a really nice rhythm and yet a very energetic pace to the program. Again, there were well over 150 in the program. And it's interesting, obviously, in most cases, there's a large drop-off in online programs. But in this case, a very high percentage kept attending every week or every live event, and were attending at the final event at the end of 8 weeks. Again, I found it engaging, but clearly others found it engaging. So as you think about what you're going to do with your time as you build your Encore career, one, look for programs that have this kind of a rhythm, this kind of a structure, because I think they can be much more valuable to you than the 1-hour webinar with just talking heads and stuff on it. Now, I will say, just in general, there was both a very generous amount of content, and I even mentioned at the final session that my challenge now was how to keep going back and revisiting the content. And incidentally, like many courses, I have lifetime access to it. But how do I keep revisiting that? Because there were so many different concepts, I really need to take time to work on some of them individually. Well, and the other thing is, that provided a lot of flexibility as to how we move forward with the work here. So there could have been one or other elements that or maybe somebody else had a different element that they were especially intrigued about. So again, this offers a lot of flexibility into how we explore the ideas, how we make use of them, how do we put them in practice in our own lives. Now, another piece of this, again, in these live programs and in the cafes, they very intentionally allowed for people to ask questions and share observations. So it wasn't, they broke out time just to have that happen. So 3, 4, 5 or more people could actually share their thoughts. And again, I believe that's not just a nice thing to do, but it encourages all of us to be speaking up, in these cases where we might be passive. And it also, again, we get to hear some different thinking, maybe some aha moments from other people. So I think, again, it's an interesting piece of the design of the program. So kind of just, going back and looking at the program itself and the actual content, the program was themed around transitions. And there were 6 transitions that they wanted to talk about. They were personal transitions, physical transitions. What do we face as we grow older? Psychological transitions. What happens now as circumstances change in our lives, whether it be in our families or our work life or any number of things. They intentionally talked about mortality. Again, is that something we're avoiding, embracing, ignoring? What are we doing about this whole idea of, hey, we can see the issue of mortality in front of us? And obviously the pandemic even accentuated some of that. They spent some time on professional transitions. What does it mean as you move forward and still want to contribute? And I think I spoke earlier in an earlier podcast about a book from Arthur Brooks. How do you move from strength to strength? And he talks about, hey, the way you're smart, the way you contribute in early parts of life is kind of different than maybe how you're going to contribute moving forward. You're going to use your wisdom, your experience, that kind of thing. And then finally, they talked about purpose transitions, helping you think about what it is do you want to do? What's my purpose going forward? So it's one of those things, and they actually they'll have another online course about that. So that's a key issue that we can explore even more as we go forward. Now, as far as the stages of these transitions, and they talked about each of these stages and each of those types of transitions. The first stage is you have to leave. You're leaving something. It may be a career. It may be you're leaving children caregiving. You may be any number of things. Maybe you're relocating. So basically, they'd say the first step in any transitions is acknowledge that you're leaving something. Then the next one, the one none of us want to be in, and we probably avoid it, is what they call the messy middle or the soup. And they use the metaphor of the caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And they're saying literally, after the caterpillar has made its cocoon, there's a period of time in where that cocoon is literally just kind of a soupy mess until basically the butterfly starts forming. So, they really helped talk about, okay, there's going to be this messy middle. You can't get around it, but you'll get through it. So it's one of those things. And then finally, the final step is the new beginnings. Recognizing when you've got some clarity, you've kind of figured out where you want to go, you're just starting to figure out how to get there. And that's one of those pieces that we often want to jump to the how before we think enough about the where. So it's one of those things you really need to sit there and consider, okay, where is it I'm going here in my next stage of my life? And then one of the general things they talk about, and it has to do with the purpose idea too, is often in the next part of life, we're moving from achievement to significance. In other words, we've been busily doing things, or, we're trying to achieve things, quarterly earnings, or we're trying to achieve the next position or the next promotion, or we're trying to achieve a new house. All of a sudden now, some of that seems to change for many people. And they want to start talking about, okay, is what am I doing significant? I'm just not achieving things, running the treadmill to hit the next step in life, but is there significance to what I'm doing? And some of this rolls back into that old phrase, I guess it's not an old phrase, but it's a phrase common now, is we want to move from being simply a human doing to into more of a human being. That whole idea of, okay, what am I here for? What am I doing? Is there a reason for all of this? And at midlife, people need to rethink that in many cases. Maybe not everyone, but it probably is going to be necessary. This gets back to the whole piece of, are we just going to learn, go through college? That'll carry us through a career, and then we're going to retire. Because we're living longer and healthier, that's probably not going to work that way. And even if you look at your children or other young people, their careers are much more fluid. They move from job to job. They move literally from career to career or skill set to skill set. All of us are going to have to be comfortable with that. So moving forward, it's going to be more of a, how do I make a transition? And, why is that important to me? And the final piece that kind of goes into that is, in my eyes, is creating a portfolio life. So as you transition, there'll be reasons you do things for passion or interest. There'll be things you do for income. There'll be things that you do because you're good at them and can help others. So there may be service, there may be passion, there may be income. There's elements. And quite frankly, your portfolio life could shift over time. It could be something you're doing now as a passion. It could develop into a source of income. But likewise, maybe whatever you're doing now for income becomes very dissatisfying, and you're going to move into something that provides a better sense of purpose and income. So this whole idea of, okay, when I move forward, I won't just be one thing. Maybe in my past career or corporate life, I was kind of just one thing. You're going to be multiple things. And so it's be interesting to kind of think about, what do you want those multiple things to be? How do you want to spend your time, attention, and energy? So this was a sort of a review of the process, as well as a little bit of the content of the Modern Elder Academy program I was just part of. So we'll revisit these ideas longer, because I'm still working on them, quite frankly. And I'm still going to be involved with the Modern Elder Academy and their alumni groups to even keep learning more about it. Well, in wrapping things up for this particular episode, remember, with an Encore career, the rewards are great. You can work when you want, where you want, and you can do the work you love. And I can help you go farther and faster based on what I've learned from being on this journey for several years. You now have the time, attention, and money to make this leap. So let me help you. If you're having any even thoughts about starting an Encore career, please contact me and see how I might help you develop your own Encore career. There are many resources going to be listed in the show notes, links to the Modern Elder Academy itself, the books, Breaking the Age Code by Becca Levy, From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life by Arthur C. Brooks, and finally, Imaginable, How to See the Future Coming and Feel Ready for Anything, Even Things That Seem Impossible Today. And this is a book about future thinking by Jane McGonigal. And then finally, there'll be a link to my website also. Well, with that, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.